Hello and welcome to the 13th lesson of this Excel course. I am Sumit Bansal, and in this video we will learn about statistical formulas in Excel. Let's get started by learning about the average formula. Average is a statistical function that gives you the average or the mean from a given set of numbers. So let me show you how this works. I type average, I hit tab to autocomplete, and you can see there are no fixed number of arguments. Average can take a lot of numbers. It can take up to 255 arguments, and you need not enter each number individually. You can also select a range. So in this case, let me show you. I select A2 to A4. Instead of typing A2, A3, A4, I can select this entire range, and I close the parenthesis and I hit Control Enter. And this gives me 12.333, which is the average of these three numbers, 10, 12 and 15. In case there is a number which is not in this range or is somewhere else in your worksheet, then you can use comma along with the range. So I type average, I select these three numbers, and I also want 20 to be added, so that I would calculate the average of these three numbers and 20. So I type that number manually here and I hit Control Enter, and this gives me 14.25, which is the average of these three numbers, 10, 12, 15 and 20. Now let me show you what happens if there is a blank cell in your range. So in this case I have A5 which is blank, and I've selected A2 to A5. Now when I hit Control Enter, this still gives me 12.33, which is same as that of this one where I had A2 to A4. The reason is that if here there is a blank or there is text in any of the cells, then average function ignores it. So blanks and text are ignored. But be very careful that only blanks and text are ignored. If you have 0 in any of these cells, then that would be counted and taken into account while calculating average. So here I have selected A2 to A6, and now when I hit Control Enter, it gives me 9.25, because here it is calculating the average of four numbers, 10, 12, 15 and 0. Since A5 is blank, this is not counted, but A6 is not blank, has a 0, and this is counted. So this is one of common mistakes that people usually make while using average function. Be sure that there are no zeros, unintentional zeros, so that they are not calculated while using this function. This is a good function to use when you have to average some numbers and there is a condition attached to those numbers. So in this cell, if I type average, I select average from the drop down list and I hit tab. You can see this function takes three arguments. The first is range, which has the criteria. Now do not get confused, this is not the sum range or the average range which has the numbers. This is the criteria range. The second argument is the criteria which you have, and third is the average range. In case you do not give average range, then Excel would consider this range to be both criteria and average range. So let me show you how this works. In range, I select A2 to A6 because I want to identify the average of the numbers which are attached to Tom. So in this case I have 10 with Tom, 12 and 0. So I want to find the average of only those numbers that belongs to Tom. So in this case I've selected the criteria range. My criteria in this case is Tom. I'm typing it manually. If you have it somewhere here in some cell or here, you can select the cell reference as well. And the average range is the numbers that I want to average. Now I hit Control Enter, and this gives me 7.33, because it goes here and checks for this condition which is Tom and sees Tom is here and here and here. So it takes only the numbers which are adjacent to Tom. So here it takes 10, 12 and 0, and it averages these three numbers. So if you divide 22 by 3, then you would get 7.33. You can also use wildcard characters in the condition in AVERAGEIF. So for example, instead of Tom, as I showed you in the previous example, instead of Tom, I want to average the numbers that are attached with a name that has the alphabet A in it. So in this case, if I do it manually, it would be Jane and Arjun, because these are the two names that have alphabet A. These three, which are Tom, does not have A in it. So to do that, I type average, I select average if and hit tab. In range, I select the criteria range, and in criteria I would type in double quotes star a star or asterisk a asterisk. This asterisk indicates any number of characters before a, and the later one indicates any number of characters after a. So essentially this condition means that any word that has alphabet A in it would satisfy this condition. And now in average range I select these numbers and I hit Control Enter, and this gives me 13.5, because when it checks for this condition which says that the word should has alphabet A in it, only these two names meet the condition, which means that only these two numbers get average out, and if you do it manually it will be 27/2, which is 13.5. You can also apply these conditions on numbers. So if you want to say identify the average of only those numbers which are greater than 10 or any condition like that, then you can again use average if condition. In this case I select the range as this because my condition would be applied on numbers, so I do not want to select criteria as names. I would select the criteria as numbers, and as I said, your range and your average range could be the same. And in criteria I would say within double quotes greater than 10, and you can choose to again select the average range, or you can leave it out because this is optional. If you do not have the average range, Excel by default takes the criteria range as the average range. Also notice that this is in double quotes. Whenever you use a mathematical operator such as greater than, less than, equal to, then always have it in double quotes. So now when I hit Control Enter, this gives me 13. And if I do this manually, I would see 12, 15 and 12. These are only the three numbers that meet the criteria, which is greater than 10. If you do this manually, then this number comes out to be 39 divided by 3, which is 30. Two things that you need to remember about average if function is that if in the average range there is a blank or text, then average if function would ignore it. And in case you leave the criteria range as blank, then average if function takes the criteria to be 0. So these are two things that you should know about average if function. Average ifs is a statistical function that can be used when you have to average values when given conditions are met. A related function is average if, but that can be used when you only have one condition. But if you have more than one condition, then you should use average ifs function. Let me show you how this works. I have some data here in cell A2 to C6. I have fruit's name, its quantity and its price. Now let me show you how to use average if. Say I have a condition where I want to find the average price when the quantity is greater than 10 and the fruit is not papaya. So to do that, I type average, and as I type you can see Excel prompts the name of the functions. I go to average ifs and I hit tab to autocomplete the function. You can see it takes a number of arguments. The first one is average range. This is the set of those values that you want to average out. In our case it would be the price points. The second is criteria range 1, and criteria 1 is the third argument. Criteria range 1 is those set of either numbers or alphanumeric characters or names that has the criteria in it. And the third one is the exact criteria that you mentioned. Similarly, you can have more than one criteria, so you can have criteria range 2, then criteria 2, so you can continue typing the number of arguments as we will see in this example. So in this case, I want to find the average of these price with two conditions. So my average range is all these price points. So I select C3 to C6 and I hit comma. Now for criteria range 1, my first condition, let me drag this down. My first condition is that the quantity should be greater than 10. So I select the criteria range because this has my criteria, and my exact criteria is that this should be greater than 10. So to do that, I would type the criteria within double quotes. So I type greater than 10 within double quotes. Always remember that in functions such as AVERAGEIFS, AVERAGEIF, SUMIF, COUNTIF, whenever you type a criteria and if it uses a mathematical operator such as greater than, less than, equal to, not equal to, then that should always be within double quotes. So my criteria 1 is that this quantity should be greater than 10. Now I would check for another criteria, which is that the fruit should not be equal to papaya. So in that case, my criteria range 2 is all these fruits, and I hit comma, and I have to specify the criteria. Again, since I'm using a mathematical operator which is not equal to, this should be within double quotes, and I type not equal to papaya, and this is my second condition. Now I close the parenthesis and I hit Control Enter, and this gives me 9.5. Now let's see how it worked. It first went to this price point, which is 20, and it checked for both the condition. The first condition is that quantity should be greater than 10. That is not met here, so this is not taken into account. The second price point is 7. The first condition is that the quantity should be greater than 10, so it meets it because the quantity is 21, and the fruit should not be equal to papaya, which is again true because this is banana. So this price point is considered for the average function. The third one is 12, and the first condition is met because this is 12 greater than 10, and the second condition is met because this is orange. Mind it that both the conditions have to be true, so 12 is taken, and the third is 32, but the first condition is not met. Actually both the conditions are not met. This is less than 10 and this is papaya. The condition was it should not be equal to papaya. So only these two numbers are averaged out. 7 plus 12, which is 19, divided by 2 is 9.5. Now you can also use wildcard characters in your conditions, and this is true for all the criteria. If you're using any function such as COUNTIF, SUMIF, AVERAGEIF, AVERAGEIFS, so you can use wildcard characters there. Now let me show you how it works. I type AVERAGEIFS, I hit tab, and here I want to find the average of the price when the price is greater than 15, which is my first condition, and second condition is that the fruit name should has the alphabet P in it. So I select the average range as the price points are my average range. My criteria range is again these price points because my condition is that the price should be greater than 15, so I have to select the same range. Since I'm using a mathematical operator greater than 15, this comes within double quotes. My second criteria is on the name of the fruit, so I select the names, and my condition is, okay, let me drag this further, the tooltip, and my condition is that the word should have alphabet P in it. Now to do that, see how I use wildcard characters. I use asterisk P asterisk. So this is my condition. This wildcard character asterisk means that there could be any number of characters before the alphabet P. So this means that if there is any word that contains P, it can have any number of characters before. So in case of example apple, this would satisfy because apple has one alphabet before P. Papaya would satisfy because it has no number of characters before P, which is okay. Asterisk mean any number of characters. It could be either 0, 1, 2 or any number. Similarly, the asterisk after P means that there could be any number of characters after P. So again, apple would meet the criteria and papaya would meet the criteria, banana, orange would not. So now when I close this and I hit Control Enter, this gives me 26. Now let's see how it worked. It goes here to the price point 20 and it checks for the condition. The first condition is that the price should be greater than 15, which is true, and the second condition is that the fruit name should have the alphabet P in it, which is again true. So this is taken into consideration for average. The second condition is not true because this is less than 15. The third is again not true, and the fourth is true because this is greater than 32, and the second condition is also met, that the fruit name has alphabet P in it. So only these two, which is C3 and C6, only these two values are taken into consideration for average function, and when it averages it is 52 by 2, which comes out to be 26. So this is how AVERAGEIFS function works in Excel. There are 5 count functions in Excel: count, count A, count blank, count if, and count ifs. In this video I will cover 3 of these functions. Let me first talk about the count function. This would count the number of cells that have a number in it. So if I type count and I hit tab to autocomplete the function, you can see that it can take a number of arguments, value 1, value 2, and if I continue to type, then it would be value 3, 4, 5, and so on. What this does is it would count those values that are a number. So in this case, if I type 1, 2, 3, and I hit control enter, then this gives me 3 because there are 3 numbers here. If I remove this first number with an alphabet and I hit control enter, then this gives 2 because there are only 2 numbers and 1 is a non-number. Instead of typing it manually, you can also select a range. So here I select A2 to A7 and I hit control enter. Now this gives me 3. The reason is that there are only 3 cells that have a number in it. A2, this has a number 1, this has number 2, this is blank, so this is not counted. A5 has the text hello in it, so this is not counted. A6 has an error, a division error, so again this is not counted. And A7 has a date, but this is counted because Excel stores dates and times as serial numbers, so this is again a number, and hence this gives 3. Now let me talk about count A function. I type count A and I hit tab. Again, this can take multiple arguments, and this function would give you the number of cells that are non-empty. So let me show you by selecting A2 to A7 and I close the parenthesis and I hit control enter, and this gives me 5. Let me check. The first one, this is non-empty. The third one, this is A3, this is non-empty. The fourth one is empty, so this is not counted. So there are 2 that have been counted. The third one, this is again non-empty, so this is counted, this is counted, and this is counted. So in these 6 cells, there is only 1 which is empty and the rest 5 are non-empty cells, and hence they are counted. The last one is count blank, and as the name suggests, this would count blank cells. And you can see, as compared to the above 2 count functions, this one only takes a range, because you cannot type a blank value inside a function, so there could only be a range here. Now when I select this entire range A2 to A7 and I close the parenthesis and I hit control enter, this gives 1 because there is only 1 cell that is blank, which is A4. Rest all cells have something or the other within it. Now let me also show you something very interesting. As of now, this cell A4, this is empty. Now what I'll do is I would type equal to double quotes without anything, which means I'm inserting blank into this, and notice that these values, count A as of now is 5 and count blank is 1. Now when I hit enter, this becomes 6 and this still remains 1. The reason this becomes 6 is because now this do not consider this cell as empty. This is still blank, but it is not empty. So you can see count blank is returning 1. It is counting it as rightly blank, but count A returns 6 because now it considers this cell filled, because there is this double quotes within it. It does not have anything, it's a null character, but still it is not empty. So be cautious when you use count A. You may see a cell, you may think this is empty, but it might not be empty. COUNTIF function, as the name suggests, counts the number of values or the number of cells in a range when a given condition is met. So let me show you how this works. I type COUNTIF and I hit tab to autocomplete. This function takes 2 arguments. The first is the range where you have the values or the cells, and the second is the criteria. So in this case I want to count the number of cells where the value is greater than 10. So I select the range, I hit comma, and now I would key in the criteria. Whenever remember, whenever you use a mathematical operator such as greater than, less than, equal to, not equal to, then it should always be within double quotes. So here I type greater than 10 and I close the parenthesis and I hit Control Enter. And this gives me 2 because within these 4 cells, only 2 cells have value that is greater than 10, which is B4 and B5. Now you need not only have values, which is numbers, but you can also have alphanumeric characters, you can have names, text, anything. So let me show you another example. I type COUNTIF and I hit tab, and here I want to count the number of fruits which has A in its name, alphabet A. So I select the name of all these fruits, I hit comma, and I type my condition, which is asterisk A asterisk. Let me drag the tooltip down and I hit Control, I press closing bracket. Let me explain the criteria first. So an asterisk means that there could be any number of characters which is represented by asterisk. So when I put an asterisk before alphabet A, this means that the name could have any number of characters before the alphabet A. And similarly I have one after A, which means that it could have any number of characters after the alphabet A. So in totality, this criteria represents any word that has the alphabet A. It could have any number of characters before it or after it. So now when I hit Control Enter, this gives me 4. Of these 4 cells, the result is 4 because all these names have the alphabet A in it. Apple has A, banana, orange, apple, all these names have A in it. Now what if I change this? Maybe say I change this to, oh no, let me change this to some other thing. Let me type hello here and I hit enter, and now this gives 3 because hello does not have the alphabet A in it. Let me Control Z to go back to the original data set. Here I have used wildcard characters. You can have the exact text in the condition. So say I type count if, I hit tab, and I again select the same range, and now I give the condition APPLE apple, and I type it manually in double quotes. You can also have this written anywhere in a cell and you can give the cell reference. That would work. That would also work here in this formula, but as of now for this video I have typed it manually. Now I hit Control Enter, and this gives me 2 because there are 2 cells that have the word apple in it. Now let me show you something. If I press spacebar here and I hit enter, this becomes 1. Now you may think that both of these cells have apple in it. These are not the same because here I only have these alphabets, but here I have a space in front of it, and hence this is not as this and this is not matching the condition. Therefore it gives you only 1. If I go back and remove the space and hit enter, this would return 2. Let me show you one very interesting criteria which says that count any number of cells, count the number of cells that have anything in it, any word, any number, anything, but it should not be blank. I'll show you what I mean and why is it so important. My criteria here is question mark asterisk within double quotes, and I hit Control Enter, and this gives me 4 because all these 4 cells have something or the other within this. Now let us revisit the criteria. It says question mark asterisk. Question mark represent one character. It could be any character, but there should be one character, and asterisk represent any number of characters. So this criteria would mean that the cell should have at least one character to be counted. In this case all these conditions are met, and hence this returns 4. What if I remove this name apple? This gives 3 because now there are only 3 cells that have one or more than one characters in it. But what happens if I type equal to and double quotes, which is nothing, blank? If I hit Control Enter, this still gives 3. But had I used the formula count or maybe count A, so count A counts the number of cells in a range that are not empty. You may think that this function would give you, so here if I type A3 to A6, say this is the function that I plan to use. I use it here and I hit Control Enter, and this gives 4. This function is ideally supposed to count those cells which are not empty, and this is giving you 4, indicating that this cell is not empty. However, this has nothing in it. So if you have a condition where you by chance import some data set or get it from someone which has this double quotes within it, then it is better to use COUNTIF with this criteria, because this would exactly give you the number of cells which has one or more than one character in it. So this would be neglected and only these 3 would be counted. COUNTIFs function counts when the given number of conditions are met. A related function is COUNTIF without the s, and that would count if there is one condition, and whenever that condition is met, it counts the number of cells or values in the range. But COUNTIFs is to be used when there are more than one conditions. So let me show you how this works. I type COUNTIFs and I hit tab to autocomplete the function. You can see it takes minimum of 2 arguments. So the first is criteria range, where you have all those values or the range of cells, and the second one is criteria, for which it would check in this range and count if that condition is met. If you have more than one criteria, then you can continue typing and it would take criteria range 2, criteria range 3, criteria 3, and so on and so forth. Now let me select this cell range, which is B3 to B6, and my condition is that count these cells when the value is greater than 10. So for that criteria, I would type the criteria within double quotes. Whenever there is a mathematical operator such as greater than, less than, equal to, not equal to, then that should always be within double quotes. So I type greater than 10, and I also have another criteria, which is these names A3 to A6, and my criteria is that count only when the name has the alphabet A in it. So what I'm doing is I've given these 4 cells and I'm saying count if it's greater than 10, and at the same time count if the word has alphabet A in it. When both these conditions are met, then only will a cell would be counted. So I type the criteria and I type within double quotes asterisk A asterisk. Asterisk represent any number of characters. So what this criteria means is that the word should have alphabet A. It could have any number of characters before that and any number of characters after the alphabet A, which essentially means that the word should have alphabet A within it. And now I hit Control Enter, and this gives me 2. Now let's see how it worked. It first checked this quantity 10. This is not greater than 10, so the first condition is not met. It goes to the second cell, which is 21. This is greater than 10, so it goes to the second condition, which is these range of cells. Since this is the second cell in this range, it checks for the second cell in this range, which is banana. It has the alphabet A within it. Then it checks the third condition, the third cell, which is 12. This is greater than 10, and the third cell here has A in it, which is orange. It has alphabet A. And it checks for the fourth cell. This is not greater than 10, so this is rejected. So there are only 2 cells which meet the condition, the first condition, and at the same time simultaneously these 2 cells also meet the condition, and hence it returns 2. What will happen if I change this to something else? If I type hello here instead of orange, this gives 1, because although this condition is met, the first one, which is greater than 10, this condition is not met. So it is important that both the conditions meet, and only then will this count these number of cells. Another example is when you only have one condition, you can use COUNTIF or you can use COUNTIFs. Here my criteria range is the name of the fruits, so I have these 4 names here, and the criteria is that it should have alphabet A in it. So I'll again use the same criteria as I used in the above cell, which is asterisk star asterisk A asterisk. And now when I hit enter, this gives me 4 because all these 4 names have the alphabet A within it. I've used COUNTIFs, but to be honest, you do not need COUNTIFs function if you only have one condition. I could have used COUNTIF as well. And let me show you a different example now for COUNTIFs. I select A3 to A6, which are these cells, and my condition here is that the name should be Apple. Now I could have used equal to Apple, but I think if you just type the criteria here, then it would work as well. And my second criteria range is B3 to B6, which are these numbers, and the second criteria is this should be greater than 20, again within double quotes. And now when I hit Control Enter, this gives me 0. Why? Because there are only two cells which have Apple in it, so these two anyways do not meet the criteria. This cell and this cell has Apple, but for both these cells the quantity is not greater than 20. It is less than 20. What if I change this to say 30? This becomes 1, because there is one condition, there is one criteria that is met, there is one set of cells for which both the criteria are met, which is the first one. So here the name is Apple and the quantity is greater than 30. Large function returns the kth largest value, so you can specify whether you want the first largest value or the second largest value or the third largest value, and from your range it would return that value. Let me show you how it works. So I type large and I hit tab to autocomplete. This takes two arguments. The first is the array of numbers and the second is k, which would be the number you want to return, the nth value, which is the first value or the second value or the third value. So in this case, let me select this small array A2 to A4. It has 3 values in it, and I say I want the first largest value, and I hit Control Enter, and this gives me 7, because in this range 7 is the largest value. But I can also look for the second largest value, so I again select this array and I say give me the second largest value, and I hit Control Enter, and this gives me 5, because 5 is the second largest value. If you have a cell which is blank or it has text in it, then large function does not consider that cell, it is ignored. So in this case, if I select A2 to A5 where A5 is blank and I say give me the first largest value and I hit Control Enter, it would return the right value because it would ignore this cell. But if you have an error value anywhere in your range, then it would return an error. So here I have A2 to A7 where A6 is a division error. So now when I hit Control Enter, this would return an error. So make sure that within your array there are no error values. Small function returns the kth smallest value from a list of numbers. So you can specify whether you want the first smallest value, the second smallest value, the third smallest value, or any number. So let me show you how this works. I type small and I hit tab to autocomplete. It takes two arguments. First is the array of numbers and the second argument is k. So if you want the first smallest number, k would be 1. If second smallest, k would be 2, and so on and so forth. So in this case, let me select A2 to A4 as the array and k as 1. This means that I am looking for the first smallest number in this list of numbers. Now when I hit Control Enter, this gives me 1 because 1 is the smallest number among these three numbers. If I want the second smallest value, then I would type this range, comma, and instead of 1, the k value would be 2. Now when I hit Control Enter, this gives me 5, which is the second smallest value. Small function ignores blank cells and text. So in case there is a range where you have blank cell, then that would be ignored. Here I select A2 to A5 where A5 is blank, and I say give me the first smallest number from these 4 cells, and I hit Control Enter, and this would only consider these numbers and returns 1, which is the smallest number. If you have an error in these cells, then small function would return an error. So here I select A2 to A7 as my array and I say give me the first smallest number, and I hit Control Enter, it gives a division error because there is a division error in A6. So the function would ignore blank cells, it would ignore text, but it would not ignore error values. So be cautious when you're using it on large data sets. If they have an error value, this function would return an error. This is a statistical function that gives you the rank of a number when you compare it with a set of other numbers. So let me show you how it works. I type rank, and you can see Excel has 3 rank functions. The first one is rank average. I'll talk about it later. The next 2 functions are rank equivalent and rank. You can see there is a small yellow triangle at the end of this function, which indicates that an equivalent function has been introduced in this version of Excel, and that equivalent version is rank.equivalent. So these 2 functions are essentially the same. You can use any of these. Rank function is available for this version of Excel, but it is better to use the newer version because this may not be available in your further new versions of Excel. So let me first show you how to use rank function. This function takes 3 arguments. First is the number for which you want to identify the rank. Second is the reference, which would be the set of numbers within which you want to identify the rank. And third is the order, whether you want to identify the rank in ascending order or descending order. If you omit order, you can see this is in square brackets indicating that this is not mandatory. This is an optional argument. If you omit order, then this function by default takes it in the descending order. Now let me show you what I mean. So I select A2 here as the number for which I want to identify the rank. The reference data set is all these numbers, which means that I want to identify the rank of 1 when compared with all these numbers. And in case of order, if I type anything, it could be descending or ascending. If I leave it out, then this would be descending. Now let's see what happens. I hit Control Enter, and this gives me 4, which means that the rank of 1 within this data set is 4. If I put the optional argument as 1, which is ascending order, then this gives me 1, which means that in this data set, if I arrange these numbers in ascending order, 1 would be at the top because this gets the top rank. An interesting thing to note here is, let me change it back to descending order. An interesting thing to note here is that if there are 2 numbers which have the same rank, in this case 3, then if it is in a descending order, 6 get rank 1, so this gets 1 rank, this gets second, this gets second, and 1 gets 4th and not 3rd, which means that if there are numbers where there's a tie, there are 2 numbers or 3 numbers, then the next number would not get the rank immediately after this, but you'll have to see how many numbers are there. So for example, if there are 2 numbers, then I would skip the next rank and give it 4th. If there had been say 3, 3, 3, 3 and this number, then all these 3 would get rank 1 and this would get rank 4, indicating that this is 4th place number in these numbers. Let me hit Control Z to get back my original data set. Alright, so this is how rank function works in Excel. As I mentioned, you can use either rank or you can use rank equivalent. These are both exactly the same functions. There's a minor change with rank average function. If I use rank average, then let's see what happens. I hit tab and this gives me 4. But if I choose to identify the rank of 3 rather than 1, then this gives me 2.5, which means that this gets the rank of 1, this gets a rank of 2.5, this gets 2.5, and this gets 4. So what has happened is, instead of giving both these as 2, it has given me the average of the ranking. So one should have been 2, one should have been 3, instead it gave me 2.5. So this is how rank average function works in Excel, but in most of the cases you would be using rank equivalent. Max function returns the maximum value from a list of numbers that you have typed in. So let me show you how this works. I type max and I hit tab to autocomplete, You can see max function takes a number of arguments. So either you can type the number manually separated by comma, or you can give individual cell references, or you can have a single or multiple ranges. In this case, let me select A2 to A4. And now when I hit Control Enter, this gives me 7 because 7 is the maximum number among these three numbers. If there are any cells which have blank or text within that, then max function ignores it. So here I select A2 to A5, where A5 cell is blank, but min function would ignore that and would still return 7. If there are any error values in the cell that you have selected, then the entire function would return a value error. So in this case I have A2 to A7, where A6 has a division error in this. Now when I hit Control Enter, this returns a division error because it cannot have an error in the range that you have feed in to the max function. Min function returns the minimum number from a list of numbers that you type into this. So let me show you how this works. I type min and I hit tab to autocomplete. Here you see it takes number of arguments. Either you can type the numbers manually separated by commas, or you can give the cell references of the numbers, or you can have different ranges. In this case I would select the range A2 to A4 and I hit Control Enter, and this gives me 1 because 1 is the minimum value among these three numbers. If in any of the cells you have blank cell or text, then min function ignores it. So here I have A2 to A5, where A5 is blank, but min function would ignore this. So I get 1 again because 1 is the minimum of these four values. If in any of the cells there is an error, then min function would also return an error. So if I select A2 to A7, where A6 has division error, then this function also returns an error. So be sure that when you're using min function in a range, there are no error. So this is how min function works in Excel. I hope you found this useful. Thank you and have a nice day.